Okay, hi everybody. Welcome to our community conversation with Amy Baumgarten from Homebody. We're talking about breath after birth and other considerations for the postpartum body. If you've not been to one of these before, then I'm going to just give this intro and really pass it over to Amy to give a presentation, and then we're going to open it up to a Q&A and have a discussion. If you are comfortable having your video on, it's a plus because it just builds a little bit of community, but there's absolutely no pressure to, or you can put it on and off. I'm recording for people to watch later, but I'm recording in speaker view, so it won't see you or what you're doing. But it will, if you start speaking, it will pop you into the recording so you can use the chat box to communicate. I see some people doing some stretches, so definitely I think Amy will encourage you also to maybe find a creative place to sit or move around while you're watching. You can bring us to the bathroom, or you can bring us outside, you can bring us to a yoga ball. Maybe just keep your video off if it's like weird, you know, if you fall asleep or something. But we're really grateful to be here, and what I'll say before we dive in is that I'm the founder of this company, Birthsmarter, and we teach childbirth preparation classes. And part of the classes that we teach are dependent on us as educators just continuing our education and learning as much as we can. And I like to do that with other people. And so after Amy and I had a good chat, I just had more questions for her and thought other people would benefit. So that's why the community conversation series got started. And if you have other thoughts or suggestions for what you want to talk about or learn about in this group, just give me your feedback, because I'm happy to organize them. And I think that's it. We'll get started. If you know pregnant people, it would be cool if they came to take our class. That's like my business plug. Okay, Amy, go for it.
Hi, everyone. I'm gonna stay in gallery mode so I can see all of your faces or your black boxes, either one. My name's Amy, as Ashley said, and I'm super excited to be here today. I love this conversation. This is kind of like my signature talk about breath, breath in the postpartum body, because breath is essential, right? We can't do it, or we can't live without it. So we're gonna get right into it. I think we have about 30 minutes so that we have enough time for Q&A. And I just wanna tell you a little bit about me before diving in. So I'm a holistic movement specialist. That's what I call myself. I combine a lot of different movement forms, Pilates, yoga, body mind centering, combined with a lot of somatic inquiry. So there's conversations that are happening between different parts of our body, different layers of our body, and it's not just muscle and bone. So we talk about how to listen in, and that's part of the work I do. And of course, my specialty is in prenatal and postpartum. I just launched a course for postpartum recovery called Returning to Center, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that as we go along. So Ashley, thanks for doing that part of the work. I wanted to see who's here. So it's great to know that there's people who've had babies, who are pregnant, and other birth advocates and professionals. I think this work is for everyone, for all womb carriers and anyone who supports a womb carrier. So with that said, I'm going to share my screen. We're going to get a little into some, I don't love the word lecture, but we're going to get into a little talking and brain work, and then we'll get into some movement too, some breathing. So let me just pull up a second. Okay, sorry everyone. We're gonna pull up the slideshow. Can everyone see this breath after birth box? Okay. All right, I'm gonna hide the images. So if I'm missing something and you can't hear me or you need me to stop, just feel free to unmute yourself. And I'm just gonna talk for a little bit. So breath after birth. This is pertinent to whether you've had a baby already or you're about to have a baby, because the preparation for postpartum begins way before postpartum. So today we're looking at a few different things. We're looking at how breathing changes during and after pregnancy. Now the difference between them is, well, there's something inside your body during pregnancy and there's something missing after pregnancy. So we're going to talk about the shifts that causes, and some anatomy images we'll bring up. We're going to talk about how the breath is the basic, most essential part of our deep core. And really that's my specialty when it comes to prenatal and postpartum, is I'm helping people understand what their core really is, the various elements and layers to it, and helping you understand that breath is essential. It's if you can't breathe, we all can breathe. If you can't breathe well, then the deep core goes to sleep, or it's imbalanced in some way, and that causes problems up and down the chains of the body. I can look at somebody and watch how they breathe and know where imbalances lie. It's that simple for me. So we're going to talk about how to reclaim a deep, satisfying breath after giving birth. And I'm sure there's many of you out there who, either pregnant or having already given birth, have a hard time getting that really deep breath again. We're going to talk about how to do it, and we're going to talk about how that is a really big part of your healing process. So I know we talk about how do we get our body back after having a baby. I'm not here to talk about that. I'm not going to talk about how to trim the body or get the body back to the form before pregnancy. We're going to talk about what the new form is that you get to work with and celebrate. So there's a few things that I want to say first about postpartum recovery before we go into the specifics of breath. And I did have this nicely played out for you, so we can go first. We're going to talk about patience. Patience is super important, because I know that after having birth, especially if you were active before pregnancy or even during your pregnancy, you want to get back into things, but maybe it hurts, or maybe you're exhausted. And so cultivating patience, changing this mindset that we have to go, especially since you are already going as a caretaker of a newborn. Having patience that your body is going to recover, your body is going to reconnect after being expanded in this beautiful way. It is going to reconnect. It just takes time. So giving yourself a break, patience. Trust goes along with that. Trusting that your body knows what it's doing, that your recovery process is not linear. It has a myriad of sporadic rounds where you're going to go hitting the same obstacles again and again, but you might also get them in a different context and understand them in a different way and go deeper with what challenges you're facing. So trusting in that. I say these two things because the work that I do in postpartum deep core recovery it's very slow to start, at least, because we're building relationships back, we're building coordination back. And so sometimes that takes time, and it also takes time for the body to start the engine again. Some of that musculature that has been expanded for months and months and months. And then depending on what happened during childbirth, that can also create some issues that make it hard for the body to wake up to what you're asking of it. So trusting that your body is getting the message and it's coming through. The more you practice, the more you do the work. Oh, let's see. Acknowledge your new form. So this body that it is and it isn't what it was before, right? And you know that, I'm sure. Acknowledging the new form. feels super potent and powerful to me in terms of changing the mindset around what postpartum recovery is. So it's not necessarily going back to where you were before. It's exploring this new landscape. It doesn't mean you can't go back to certain exercise or activity that you used to love to do, but acknowledging how you'll do that in this new form is a really big deal. And of course, moving, but moving in a way that helps you reconnect to your center and always feeds you back into your center. These are the 4 principles of postpartum recovery. Breath, as I say a million times, is everything, and it underlies all other movement. It's the primary driver of our deep core. So your deep core is activated, and I'll talk about what that is in a second, but our deep core is activated by our breath. So just like you could put a weight in your hand and you could, activate your biceps and do a bunch of reps with your arm, you don't have the same volitional musculature in your core as you do in your arm or your other skeletal muscles. So by volitional, I mean you can't just will it into action. So our breath creates vacuum, it creates pressures and vacuums, right? As we fill up our lungs, we fill up our respiratory cavity and our abdominal cavity, it creates pressure in the body that creates expansion. When we exhale, we create a vacuum. That vacuum is what creates drawing inward toward our center. So that's what I mean by it being the primary driver. And that's what I mean by, but it's not going to feel the same way as when you're just exercising your biceps or lifting your legs in the air a million times. So think of it like a pump. Think of your breath like a pump. That's the motor for the rest of the deep core. We're going to get into a little bit of anatomy. I hope you like anatomy as much as I do, but I'll keep it brief. There's 2 images here. The first one on the left is the deep core. As I was talking about, I'm just going to minimize so I can use my cursor. As I was talking about, here is I didn't talk about this yet, excuse me. But the diaphragm is the muscle that we are going to be talking about today. This is our breathing muscle that's attached at the top of the deep core. Our deep core is comprised of everything from the bottom ribs to the bottom of the pelvis. So that includes pelvic floor. It includes the deep abdominal layer that wraps around the spine. It includes the diaphragm, which we'll talk about, and it includes the muscles along that interweave inside the spine. So the deep, deep layers. All of these muscle layers are very deep to the body. And again, because they're so deep, we don't feel them just by squeezing and holding. So we have to learn a new way. This image on the right shows you what I was talking about with the pumping. So you can see the diaphragm moving down as breath comes in, and that presses the it presses the abdomen outward and the pelvic floor downward. And as you exhale, the vacuum pulls the diaphragm up, it pulls the abdomen in and backward, and it pulls the pelvic floor up from the bottom. So I think about this whole construct almost like a room with a ceiling, a floor, and 4 walls, right? And it's kind of this movable room. Now, specifically, we're looking at the diaphragm today. The diaphragm is this beautiful, it's just so beautiful, right? So it sits inside the rib cage. It's this dome-like shape. So you can see that the edges, I'm going to show you the picture below it too, the edges of it attach to the inside lining of the rib cage. Let me know if you can't see that, but it's this muscle it's circular and it sits horizontal in the body, and it has the edges attached to the bottom ribs all the way around to the spine with its center free. So if you think of a trampoline, or if you think of, remember the parachute game in gym class, right, where everyone's holding the edges and you're floating the center up and down, your diaphragm has a similar movement quality. Or if you've seen jellyfish, which I often put in these slides, but I forgot this time. So if you've seen the way jellyfish swim, we have this dome in the center with the edges attached to the ribs. So when we breathe well, we're breathing with our diaphragm. Our diaphragmatic breath, like I said, think of a trampoline. It accommodates those pressures, as I was saying. So as you inhale, it's going to spread wide, lowering toward the abdomen, creating all the air that you need, all the space you need for breath in the rib cage. And as you exhale, the muscle domes up in the center, pushing the air out. Now, just either you can write it in the chat or just raise your hand if you're on video. How many of you think about your inhale as moving downward and your exhale moving upward, as opposed to your inhale moving up and outward? Just curious if anyone thinks about their breath moving downward. So this is not super common, but we're gonna try it together. I'd like you to put your hands on your ribs, and anywhere is fine. Okay. And just breathing normally, you're gonna take an inhale, fill up your rib cage nice and wide. And then as you exhale, let it out slowly. Feel how your ribs come together, right? Most likely that's what's happening for you, right? So as we inhale, our rib cage expands three-dimensionally. So inhale nice and wide. I have my little toy here. And then as you exhale, the ribs draw together. Okay? Now that's what's happening at the edges of the diaphragm. Yeah, at the edges of the diaphragm, it pull when you inhale, the ribs pull apart. But what's happening if you see these two little muscular attachments here against the spine? They are pulling the center of your diaphragm down as you inhale. So the pumping action of the center moves down as your ribs widen. And then as you release your breath, the diaphragm domes up, pushes the air out. So again, thinking about diaphragmatic breathing as moving down on your inhale and up on your exhale is different than if I think about widening the ribs out, exhale, pull them together, right? And this is a common experience. Whether you're pregnant or not, you might not have a womb and you still might do this kind of breathing where we expand from the ribs first and foremost. So during pregnancy, we're going to talk more about the breath and get it in our bodies in a second, but I just want to tell you a little bit about what's happening during pregnancy and postpartum so you understand more about the challenges of breathing then. So here is our pregnancy image, and we still have the diaphragm here. You can see my cursor. The diaphragm is this thin little red line. These are all the organs. And here's baby taking up all the space. So as baby grows in the belly, baby pushes the organs up against the diaphragm, right? So then you have a scenario where you're trying to get your breath, you're trying to take a breath in, but your diaphragm won't move down anymore because it's being pushed up against. So what do? You try to pull breath in, try to spread the ribs, flare the ribs forward, and we can't actually get that deep, satisfying breath that comes with resting and widening the diaphragm down. Now, I work with my prenatal folks in ways that help you reclaim the diaphragmatic breathing, even when baby is pressed up against your diaphragm. It's totally normal for that to happen, but the top at the fundus. So the diaphragm gets stuck when it's not being used. Then you have the baby And we still have all these patterns even after we've given birth. So as baby leaves the body and my body is starting to come back together, my diaphragm might still stay stuck because I might still have that pattern where I just want to breathe in from my neck or from my chest. So we're going to talk about shortness of breath in just a moment. The last thing I want to say are just, so we talked about these challenges. The last thing I want to say though, and I apologize for that noise, is that postpartum recovery is really about reclaiming your breath and getting the movement of the diaphragm back so that the deep core can reconnect, rejoin, because the strength of your deep core is the source of the strength of your limbs, of your spine, and any coordination that you do among them. So with that said, I want to go into a few breathing exercises. Oh, and I want to show you, I get a little bit ahead of myself. I just want to show you really quickly this amazing diaphragm you can find on Google. Animation.
The primary muscle of respiration is the...
Thank you. So just take a look at this amazing image of the diaphragm breathing, right? Inhale down and wide, exhale.
Amy, it didn't switch for me.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Sorry about that, guys. Let me share. I think you have to share a different screen. Okay, hold on one second. Oh, I see. Share screen. Okay, I just can't. Learning. Sorry about that, everybody. So let me go back a little bit here just so that you can see this diaphragm in action. You can see that it pumps, right? This is going really fast, but your inhale will move the diaphragm down, the exhale will move it up, the inhale pushes the ribs wide, and the exhale draws them together. And from underneath, again, you can see these, they're called kura, these little muscular attachments pulling on the diaphragm along the spine. So that is the diaphragm. And I just want to go into doing some of it ourselves. And we will answer questions. I know I'm talking really fast. But is it okay to go into some exercise now? Because it might actually answer some of those questions. Okay. So you can breathe in any position. I hope you breathe in all the positions. I'm gonna stay seated so I can keep talking to you. If you want to do this seated against a wall, lying down, or any other position, standing up, you can feel free to do this. But we are going to look for a long spine just to kind of make space in our bodies. And let's just start off. You can keep your eyes open or closed and just start to breathe as you normally would. Breathing in, breathing out. I'm going to give you a few minutes for this. Just kind of get into the rhythm of your unique breath cycle. Where do you feel your breath touch? Where does it reach on the insides of your body? Where does the breath move freely? Where does it move not so freely? We're going to focus our breath in different places in the body. We're going to start with the heart. You might choose to put your hand on the heart center or just let your arms relax. See if you can send your breath into this place. Can you expand three-dimensionally, or does it feel like it expands one place? Breathe in all directions if you can. And just noticing for yourself how that feels to breathe into the heart space. This is the chest area. We're going to bring our breath downward into the navel. You might choose to put your hand on the navel and see what it feels like to direct your breath a little lower in the body. So again, can you imagine expanding both forward and backward, to the right, to the left, expanding in all directions. Just noticing what the navel feels like when you breathe in the navel. And finally, we're going to move our breath even lower down to the womb space. Now, we don't all have the organ, the uterus organ, but we all, no matter gender, have a womb space, a creative center. So just imagine that space above the pubic bone, in the center of the pelvis. Can you breathe into that space? Can you breathe it three-dimensionally? Notice if you can breathe into the lower back. The back of the womb space is the lower back. Can you breathe down into the pelvic floor? Whatever that is. And allowing your exploration to come to a close, take one final breath. Just allow your eyes to open. So, what's so interesting for me about this, and I want to hear from you guys, is that we can direct our breath. Our breath isn't just one way. And unless you felt like, nope, I only felt the one kind of breath, which we can talk about that too, you might have noticed there's different places that your breath can touch in your body. So it means that it's very versatile, it's very open. And by doing this heart, navel, breath pattern, you're giving yourself a chance to broaden your patterns, broaden your habits with your breath. Because of course, breath becomes an afterthought when we're going about our day. But if we take a moment to get balanced and centered in our breath and understand all the directions that we can breathe, then that becomes automatic. And you get to breathe, your body will breathe the way it needs to in a given moment, in a given position. You don't have to labor the breath. So I want to show you one more breath exercise. So we're going to go back to the ribs. We're going to go back to the diaphragm. And so I'm taking my thumbs around the back of my rib cage and wrapping my fingers around the front. So I'm just holding myself, which feels very gentle and loving too. And I'm imagining that I'm holding that diaphragm. So as you inhale, I want you to, we already did this, we felt the ribs widen, but I want you to imagine the center of your diaphragm dropping and spreading wide. Can you remember that image from the animation? So breath is moving, the diaphragm is moving down, creating lots of space for the breath to fill up the respiratory cavity. And then as you exhale, imagine that center of the diaphragm rising up, and that pulls the ribs closed, right? So instead of us going right to the ribs and pulling them apart, I'm going to imagine the diaphragm moving down and pressing the ribs wide, as if I had some dough, some Play-Doh, and I was wanting to spread it out right from the center outward. So just try a couple of these easy breaths with that focus, with that visual. And the more I can find the depth of my breath, the more width I feel, the more satisfying the breath is. Now, when we have shortness of breath, like I said before, it's because the diaphragm isn't able to press down. And postpartum, it can feel, I don't know if any of you are feeling this, right? That it might be hard to even sense what the diaphragm is doing, or if you even have a diaphragm, which you do. So this exercise, this variation of what we just did, is going to help with that. This is to stretch your diaphragm and create more sensation. So we're going to take our hands again on our ribs. We're going to take a big breath in. Feel those ribs really widen. And now I want you to keep widening your ribs into your hands as you exhale. You can exhale out through your mouth slowly. Keep puffing up your ribs as long as you can through the exhale. Keep going. Keep widening as you exhale. Keep widening. Keep doing it. Keep doing it. Keep widening. Keep widening. And when there's no more breath left, relax those ribs. And then take an inhale. Just take a normal breath and we'll try it one more time. So what you're doing is, as you're pulling the edges apart, you're exhaling and lifting the center up. So you're stretching the two parts of the diaphragm. So hopefully you're feeling a difference. Breathing not only helps us reclaim our deep core, it's also supportive to your nervous system, rebalancing the sympathetic and parasympathetic. So you might be feeling that too, a little calmer, maybe a little sleepier, maybe yawning. That's great. All of that is really great. I just want to pause there because I just gave you so much, and I know it's a lot. And see if there's any, I know that there's some questions in the chat, and we'll do like an official Q&A, but are there any specific questions about those exercises? The heart, womb, navel womb breathing along the midline, or the diaphragmatic breathing? Is there anyone who's having any trouble with those that we can troubleshoot real quick before we go to Q&A?
I just wondered if you could re-talk through the last one you just did.
Absolutely. I'm going to come up onto my knees too. This is a weird one. So this is very counterintuitive. This is not how I want you to breathe every day, but try. So I don't know if this is helpful, right? These are my ribs. So this is where my hands are going to be as if they're on my ribs. Okay. So we're going to inhale nice and wide, fill up your ribs. Now, I'm not going to let this shape come back together as I exhale. Okay. Now this is going to take some, what I want to say about this is, as you're exhaling, don't do it fast. If you exhale fast, the ribs are going to come right together. Imagine like you're just blowing out a really tiny candle for a really long time, right? Give it several rounds of seconds. So we're here, we widen the ribs, and then I just purse my lips and let the air out. Almost like, you know, when you have a balloon, you fill up a balloon and you want to let the air out slowly, you kind of squeeze the nozzle there. That's what we're doing. And I like to bob my head side to side while I'm waiting for the breath to go away. But what I'm training is my intercostal muscles are the muscles between the ribs. So they're not automatically contracting down onto my diaphragm as I do this. And at the very end, after you've got all the air out, yes, your ribs will come together a little bit. Don't feel like you have to keep this exact shape the whole exhale. They will slowly come together, but we're just trying to create a stretch between the two, cause and effect. Then just take a breath. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Just, I'm noticing like some pulling in of my abdominal muscles in that. Is that part of it, or pulling up on the pelvic floor?
Normally, yes, absolutely. That is part of your deep core, is the belly coming in and the pelvic floor lifting up on the exhale, so that your deep core is in good shape. That's wonderful. For this exercise, what I want to say about that is that the belly and the pelvic floor, mainly the belly, but those can become accessory muscles to the exhale, right? So the exhale primary muscle is, breathing primary muscle is the diaphragm. And then we have these accessory muscles of the intercostals between the ribs. Sometimes it's the neck muscles that pull the breath in. The belly muscles can squeeze in too, and the pelvic floor can also squeeze. So they are necessary, but can you get that diaphragm to move primary? And so when we do this exercise, this diaphragm stretch, can you relax the belly?
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Amy, do you see this question that came in? Can you use this breathing for labor? I have thoughts about that. I'm not sure if you have thoughts about that.
No, do not use this breath for labor. That's my answer. You can use this breath. I use this one with my pregnant clients in sessions all the time. So before labor, absolutely, I encourage it, because again, baby is rising up into your diaphragm, so you can't get that deep breath, but you can stretch the diaphragm and create a little bit. I mean, obviously baby isn't necessarily, I was gonna say baby's not gonna move, but baby can move, right? And your diaphragm can actually encourage feedback against baby that encourages them to move into the right place. Sometimes that can be really useful. But for labor, no. I know there are specific breathing techniques for labor, and I am not an expert on breathing techniques for labor, so I'm gonna leave that to the experts. Now, I'm happy to go into the other questions and continue on with them, because I know there's some great questions in here. So let's see, there's a question about, well, first of all, I just want to ask has anyone felt, if you have had a baby and you are on the other side, or actually if you're pregnant too, do you have shortness of breath during your pregnancy? It's hard because you can't really raise your hand, but you can chime in if you, Ashley says yes. And yeah, the reason for that is, as I said, and Carolina says yes. So that has to do with the lack of diaphragm. So another thing that I love to do is arm circles. Get your rib cage up and moving, because your rib cage is your diaphragm is your rib cage. So some really simple side bends. So get your shoulder, thank you, Carolina, yes, just lifting your ribs up, right? And this is another wonderful place to breathe, is to have your arms over your head and try to get that diaphragm to move down. And exhale it up. Right? So just another way to access more space for the diaphragm to move inside. Now, if you are having shortness of breath and you're doing these exercises and you're still like, ugh, I don't know. One thing I'm going to suggest, another thing I'm going to suggest other than the arms, is focus on your exhale. And this is big, and I don't hear this often. Focus on the release of your diaphragm upward. If you remember, the center of the diaphragm has those muscle attachments to the spine, and when they contract, it pulls the diaphragm downward, flattens it, and that's your inhale. On the exhale, those muscles release the diaphragm upward. So your diaphragm is relaxed in exhalation. So focus on relaxing the diaphragm, because usually when it's stuck, it's stuck, right? It's not moving because it's rigid. So exhale. Especially if you're like, if you're one of those people who are like, I'm exhaling, but there's like a little bit left of your exhale before you start to inhale again. Get it all the way out. Empty it out, 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 out. And then if you take a deep breath and you're like, oh, I still, take another deep exhale. Exhale, exhale, exhale. Feel that diaphragm rise up, 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 up. Find more capacity to exhale, and you'll find more range of motion and space for your inhale. Carolina says, yes, that feels much better. So this person says that she doesn't have shortness of breath during pregnancy, and she's wondering why. She's been training her breath for a long time with yoga. Do you think that's just because I was able to find movement in my torso elsewhere? So I would have to see you and talk more with you about the details on your practice before, but I'm sure that if you had a breath practice before pregnancy, you have a lot of capacity in your diaphragm. Now the other issue is, how did baby sit? Was baby lower or fuller forward as opposed to upward, right? So there's a lot of variables that could have created for you the ability to not have shortness of breath, and I commend you on that. That's great. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of factors around that. Winona says the diaphragm is like a bellows. That is so true. Let's see. I'm just looking to see if there's any other questions. Does anyone want to speak a question?
I just wanted to comment, Amy, and also officially open it up with the time that we have left for people to like write in more questions or thoughts. So maybe while I'm saying my not very, important thing, it will give people time to formulate a question. Just that in my learning of the pregnant body and preparing people for birth, and then especially the last few months hosting these conversations and having different professionals on, every single time I'm struck by how simple the suggestions are. Like when we did our hand exercise one, there were certain things from a physical therapy standpoint, like preparing the body for labor, of moves that I might not have known. But in general, finding this balance and like reconnecting with the nervous system and finding breath and space in your body feels so simple. And what I keep coming back to is how whatever is happening culturally in our lives is getting in the way of us living that way all the time. Like, we don't reach for things anymore because we put things at counter height, or we sit or drive all the time because we're working on the computer and not outside. And how really, like, the days that I'm not working, I'm so much more connected. But I don't think I've thought at all yet today about my breathing, and like really couldn't breathe into my back at the beginning and now can. And we did that for maybe 5 minutes. Like, it's not a huge investment. Just it's important for me to learn it again and again and again.
I agree. I think it is really important to learn. I still learn. Oh yeah, it is so much more simple. And that's such a beautiful point, Ashley, because I was talking to my brother yesterday who's in PT, and he's like, yeah, I'm better. I'm like, yeah, like what a small investment for such a huge shift in your body. And he was like, yeah, that's crazy. I'm like, no, it's not. The truth is that the body, just like the earth, is very forgiving. And we give it a few inputs that guide it. It knows already. And that's the trust part, is that your body knows already what's happening, what it needs to do. But if you sit in a dark room all day, you're going to assume that the sun is gone, right? That there's no such thing as a sun. Our environment is going to really affect how we think and move and feel. So if that's true, then a little bit of breath can go a long way to jumpstarting the body's natural design. Jade has a couple of questions. I don't know if Jade wants to speak her questions out loud or if you want to type them in.
Hi there. Yes, I'll say them. So I know that like breath can be used to kind of massage and stretch the diaphragm. But can the diaphragm also be massaged like physically?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, and there's visceral body workers who will know more than me about some of the depths. But for our purposes, for our everyday, what you can do, I'm just gonna scooch up a little bit here, is take your fingertips and find your bottom ribs. I'm gonna show you on the skeleton. This will be fun. Okay. So find those bottom ribs here in the front. You can do it on either side. And I'm just gonna take my fingers and I'm gonna scoop right under the bottom rib to the inner surface. Let me know if you guys can't see this. And I'm just gonna massage a little bit back and forth. And then I'm gonna move to the next spot and I'm gonna massage, wiggle. This is obviously the edge of the diaphragm. You can do on both sides. You can keep going. It gets a little harder as you get towards your, the thoracolumbar tissue. That's that tough tissue on either side of your spine. So this area here might get harder to feel. You just do your best. Okay. You can do that. And then you can come all the way up. You can put like a finger or two. This is the bottom of your sternum where the ribs come together. This little point here is called your xiphoid process. I mean, isn't that just a cool name? So your xiphoid is very tender, very sensitive, but so don't do this very harshly, but you can put a little pressure, just kind of scoop around the tip of it and just massage there too. And just release. So that's one way to touch the diaphragm. The center is a little bit more difficult since it's so deep in the body.
Do you see the other question that came in too? When you practice this breathing, can you actually feel your diaphragm or is it more envisioning it?
That is such a phenomenal question, and I'm going to get a little spiritual with you. So personally, yeah, I can feel it. I think that there's a very thin line when it comes to this deep work between thinking and feeling. And there's not actual skeletal nerves. So we have skeletal nerves that run from our spine to our limbs and to different parts of our torso that help us feel and innervate, move. The deep cores, which includes the diaphragm, those don't have as much innervation or nerve endings in them. But that said, you can feel the sides of your ribs, right? You know where your ribs are, and the more you touch and massage and move with the ribs, the more you can feel that. And so it's just it's a matter of bridging your imagination from what you can feel to this mysterious space in the middle. And I do follow, I can feel, it's almost like, I forget the movie, but it's like an 80s childhood movie where like they're walking on, they have to trust that when they step off the edge of the cliff, the bridge is going to start being made. And then they just walk, as they walk further out into nothingness, the bridge is being created underneath their feet. So the more I can do this practice, the more I do feel that bridge into the mystery of the center. And then I allow that there might still be spaces that I fully don't feel, but at this point, doing this as long as I have, I really get a sense of that. So you can too, the more you practice. Visualization is really key in the beginning.
Okay, we're almost out of time, so I definitely want to give people another minute if they have thoughts or clarifying questions about any of the breath or things that they can be doing, especially those of you who are postpartum. I know it's trickier for you to participate in a webinar because you are holding a baby and dealing with life right after birth, but you can also follow up with Amy or I privately afterwards on email or Instagram. But I do want to plug on her behalf her amazing 12-week returning to center class, which I haven't moved through all of it, but I have looked through in depth, and it is amazing. And I'm a fan of learning about all different rehab programs and different approaches because different personalities match with different people. So I think this session hopefully does give you a really good sense of Amy and her work and the quality and intentionality behind the practice of that program. So if you're a childbirth educator, you can check it out. If you are postpartum and you think it might help you, it's really wonderful. And Amy, there's something else you created. I forget. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay. I want to say if you are a childbirth educator, I'm going to put my email in the chat box. And if you want to check out the course for free to see if it's right for your clients, you can email me and let me know. I'll do that. And for anyone else and for everyone, I just created a free masterclass on the deep core. So we go into the breath in the beginning, but we also go into the pelvic floor. We go into the deep abdominals. We fully move on the mat. And that's a totally free class you can find on my website. So there's just on the homepage, there's like a promotional bar at the top. If you click it, you can sign up for that. So I'm really excited about just sharing this material so people understand what the deep core is and how it supports the body.
And if you're pregnant, we go into some of this. I'm doing another pushing workshop on July 9th, this Thursday. So we have that coming up from Birthsmarter. Amy's website is homebodymovement.com. We're at birthsmarter.com. Okay, and then the last question, do you have any comments about the space between breath, between the inhale and the exhale?
I really do. That could be a whole other webinar. I will say that it's a beautiful place to explore. Just really quickly, I'll say, to explore on your own. My teacher calls it transitional space. So it's the space between giving and receiving. It's the place between the in and the out, the wave cresting and the wave falling. So it's a wonderful place to just pause and do nothing and allow. I'm going to call that the allowing space for now, and maybe we'll do another workshop on just that. Thanks for the question.
Okay, I was just following up in the comment box. Cool. I'll hang out here for a minute if anybody else has questions, but thank you for joining us. It was great to see those of you who I saw and have all of the rest of you who were here in spirit listening along. Definitely stay in touch with us. And yeah, have a great day, everybody. Keep breathing.
Keep breathing.
Keep breathing.
Thank you.
Hi, Emily. Hi, Lisa.